Okay, so this is Minecraft. Minecraft is a game in which you are dropped into a randomly generated world comprised of blocks about 1 meter square, and generally you're dropped into a world without any resources or tools, and your job is to collect resources to make tools in order to get more resources and build structures. And you build the structures in order to protect yourself from monsters that come out at night and will try to attack you. This world we're looking at here is a world I have constructed based on the tutorial world. I'm playing this game on the Xbox 360. It also exists on Macs and PCs as well. And the tutorial world is here to show you some of the things that are possible. But I started building in it, and I haven't decided to give it up yet and move on to a completely new random world. One thing that I did do was to start building a mine shaft right near my house. And moving through the mine shaft, I discovered a nearby set of natural caverns. And these caverns eventually brought me back up to the surface in another location. The problem is, of course, is it's very easy to get lost inside these caverns. It's possible to build signs out of wood that will help you come back to the surface, but what I decided to do in this case was that if I was going to go into a mine shaft in one location and emerge at another location, what I would do is I would take advantage of Minecraft's ability to let you build a rail system out of resources that you mine, and this system would allow me to shuttle back and forth between surface locations so that no matter where I come up from the underground system onto the surface, I can always get back to my house where I keep all my resources and all my extra tools. So trying to build a rail system proved to be pretty challenging. And so what I decided to do then was build a new test world just for the purposes of seeing what was possible with a rail system before I committed my resources in my game world to building a rail system. So here I've got another world. It's called New World. This is a special flat world. It has no monsters in it, and it has no limitations on the resources. I don't have to mine the resources myself. I don't have to build tools and items. I can just select them from a menu. So, and also I can fly around this world. Let's see if I can manage to get the fly. Okay, there we go. I can fly around this world without any movement restrictions as well. So what we'll do is we'll go over here and take a look at some of the rail systems that are possible. I'm going to place some torches around here so we can see. You can see some of the wildlife in the game, like this chicken. So here we have a very simple rail system operating. Here, I'm going to stop this cart. There we go. Pick that up. And every rail system is comprised of the certain same parts. There are ordinary pieces of rail like this. There are powered pieces of rail like this system with the gold rail and the red. The red signifies that this segment is powered. This segment is powered. And what it is powered by is this special torch. The game Minecraft has a system of somewhat like electrical impulses called redstone. This is a redstone wire that links this button over here to this piece of powered track that's on a slope, and this torch here is powering the adjacent segments of powered track. Now, powered track doesn't operate the way electrical track does in model railroading. Pieces of track that are powered, like this one is here by the adjacent torch, will power other adjacent segments of powered track, but ordinary track does not carry an impulse and does not power a cart. It will simply allow a cart that is moving to pass over it. Also, pieces of powered track behave differently depending on what kind of cart is on them. They generally behave the way a ordinary piece of track would if it was on a slope, so that a cart that is already moving will be accelerated, but a cart that is not moving will simply sit there. So what it's possible to, and also a cart that is not moving on a piece of powered track will not move just because you supply power to that track with a torch or with a button. But by placing the last track in a segment here at a slope, Hitting the button that provides power will accelerate the normal motion that propels that down the track. Also, you can get a similar effect by placing a powered track and then hit it with a block on the end. This tells the track that there's only one way that the cart can move in, and so pressing the button here will also move it away. But on a flat piece of track in the middle of a long segment, simply adding a powered impulse will not move the cart. And also you can get a faster takeoff by using the powered rail on a slant like this. And here it's possible actually to get in the cart and to push this button and to go this way, and then push this button and go back the other way. So here's a very simple point-to-point line moving in both directions on a single piece of track with a single cart. And if all you're doing is building a stop between two locations, if you're starting out early in a game, that's really all you need. But it does have some problems in that once you start getting multiple stops, it becomes more difficult to manage, in the sense that, well, you'd have to stop at one location, get out of the cart, get in another cart, hit another button. So what I wanted was a system that had a little more automation in it. The next thing I considered is a kind of a loop style track plan, which you can see here. Let's get these carts out of the way and push this one back. And this system here has a number of features that are improvements over the previous one. One is that it's fully automatic, and the way the automated system works is that instead of just the button at the end of the track, the way the first system has, this one has this special track, which is called a Detector Rail. And as you can see, this provides an electrical impulse to the adjacent tracks. So this provides power to the other track and causes the cart to move in the other direction because it only has one way to go. That track is constantly powered by this torch, and that other one is powered only when the cart passes over the detector in this direction. You can also hit the button. The button will also make the cart move in that other direction. So here we see the cart moves out in a loop. Now, there's also what they call the southwest rule. Switches in Minecraft do not operate the way traditional model railroad switches work. There's no way to put a junction down and force it to go in one direction or another, and switches don't have state. You cannot give them an impulse and move them into one position and have it stay there. Instead, Minecraft has what they call the south or west rule. Whenever you put down a track where 3 or more pieces of track join, it will always prefer that the main line moves either in the direction of south or west as opposed to north or east. But you can use a detector track like this one here to provide an impulse that will cause the track to reverse itself, but only temporarily, only while the cart is triggering the detector. The problem with this is that although it works well at certain speeds, if a cart is going too fast or too slow, it's possible that either it will be triggered when it shouldn't be, or that it will not be triggered when it should be. At this speed with an empty cart, this one is working fairly reliably, but sometimes if you get in the cart, it moves in the wrong direction. Also, you can see over here, since this piece of track is heading in the opposite direction, the detector has to be before the switch on the main line rather than after the switch on the spur, and does the same thing. It reverses the northeast travel instead of the southwest travel, and it moves the track onto that ending. And you can see it's fairly reliable. If you get in the way, you knock a cart back, it will just go back to the last station, it will reverse itself and then go on. So this is always moving in a counterclockwise direction. But the problem with using this as a track plan in the game is that if you're starting off very early in the game and you only have a few locations, like I do, 3 locations. I have my house, I have a cavern opening in one direction, and I have a small town in the other direction. In order for this track plan to work, you need to have a return loop that goes from one distant location to the other distant location, bypassing the center location. And the problem is that that would be a lot of track in my game. It means a lot more resources. And if you want to have this system constantly operating, that's what I want. I want carts that you don't have to operate always by pressing a switch. I don't want you to have to manage a supply of carts the way a lot of other systems do by having a holding area with a bunch of carts that dispense to you automatically. I want just a few carts, looping the system constantly on timers. So this track plan wasn't completely convenient for that because I'd have to build a big loop that goes from, say, my A point, which is my cavern, through my B point, which is my hometown, through my C point, which is the other town. But then I need a loop going from C all the way back to A. What I really wanted was a system that could handle multiple carts. For instance, this one can handle two carts operating at the same time. I have three stations, so I can have two carts, the number of stations minus one. That means that one of them is always free, and these carts shouldn't ever hit each other. The problem is that they will hit each other in a couple of different situations. One is that if an obstruction causes a cart to reverse, like an animal walking across the track, the cart moving backwards from a station along the main line will hit the one approaching from the other direction. And the other situation when you can have a collision is if I get into the cart. And the problem with that is that because powered rails in Minecraft operate like a piece of normal track that is on a slope, the powered rails operate differently for empty carts than they do for full carts. And you can see that if I get into a cart. Let's see, I'm sure I'm going to get into a cart in a minute. Come on, get into the cart. Here we go. I'm going to get in the cart. Okay, now I'm in the cart, and you'll see I'm moving much more quickly along the system, and I immediately catch up to the other cart from behind and bump it. And that's the problem, because this system doesn't have any delays built into it. The stations just send the carts right back out immediately, as fast as they can. There's no flow control. There are no delays in the system at all. And so I knew that this wasn't really going to work for a number of reasons. So the next thing I did was this track plan, and these terminal stations are a little bit different than the other ones. You can see here there are some extra pieces here, and what these do is that these are repeaters. You can see the other problem is that sometimes the animals get into the cart. If an empty cart collides with an animal, the animal will end up getting in the cart, but that can cause it to stop. So these repeaters are useful for a couple things. Normally, a signal will only pass along a redstone wire for a distance of 8 blocks, no more. If you want to use these two are right next to each other, so there's no problem. But if I connected those with red wire, I can't go longer than 8 blocks without a repeater. A repeater will give me another 8 blocks of range. The other thing that these pieces do is that they function like diodes. They only allow impulses to pass in one direction, from here through the detector, through this loop, and back to the powered track, not in the other direction. I don't really use that feature in this, but if you're doing a more complicated circuit, that's useful. The other thing that these do is provide a delay. By clicking on the pieces, you can set either a long or a short delay, and then by stringing more of the devices together, you can get longer and longer delays. Here in this position, when the pins are close together, you get a short delay. And if you click it a few times and move the pins further apart, you get a long delay. So I've got these three repeaters together. They're wired serially, and they're all set to provide as long a delay as possible. And so what happens is that the cart comes in, runs over the detector. That sends a signal into the three repeaters, but the cart reaches the end of the line before the signal does. And so momentarily, the cart stops at the end of the line before the signal reverses the impulse and sends the cart the other way. And what I have here is I have a central station design. I thought that to eliminate the problem of reliability of switches, I would try and cross the track, bring the track in above the main track and cross it in the other direction. Turned out this really did not improve reliability of the switches at all. I thought that it would be more reliable in one direction than the other, but it turns out it's not true. And this station design is a little bit complicated, but it does provide a delayed stop in the middle in both directions. So in one direction, the track goes up to this high station. It triggers the detector. The signal goes through the sets of delays, but it hits this powered track that has no impulse in it. And if a piece of powered track that has no power is hit by a cart, the cart will stop instead of moving. So what happens is that the cart comes in, triggers the detector, reaches the powered track before the impulse does, and it will wait there for the impulse to arrive. And that's why stations should be on a slope if you don't have a block. In other words, if you have an end station, a cart will always move away from a block if it only has one direction to move in, like at a terminal station. But if it's in the middle of the track, it should be on a slope so that the system knows in which direction to push the cart. So this system was pretty good, but I felt there had to be a way to do a simpler track plan than this. This is kind of complicated. It requires that the two stops be oriented differently from each other. I thought it'd be kind of confusing for pedestrians coming into the station. So I like the addition of the delays here, and I knew that you could string these systems together, but I wanted to see if it was possible to do it without having any switches. So this is a station that I built. The station actually conceals some of the wiring underneath it. You can see, if you look through these holes, you can see the repeaters down there. And this is just a single piece of track with stops in both directions and detectors on either end. And so what happens is that the cart comes in, powers up one side of the slope, hits the unpowered brick on the unpowered track on the other side, which stops it, and then the delayed signal from the repeaters comes around, powers the track, and the cart moves in the opposite direction. So this is a very efficient design in the sense that it doesn't use a lot of track. It uses far fewer parts than the earlier design. But the problem with this is that it's really only good for a small system that only has a few stops. If you've got only 3 stops, it means you have one station like this and 2 terminal stations, and that's pretty efficient. But once you start getting above 4 or 5 stops, the problem with this is that you'll be waiting a long time for a cart, because with only one rail through the entire system, you can only have one cart operating. If you have more than one cart in the system, they will eventually collide. And the problem is that carts that hit each other tend to just kind of slow each other down and drag each other down, and just the system will just stop working. So, despite the fact that it's more complicated to have 2 lines of track within every station, I realized that I was probably going to have to do it that way if I want to have a system that has a lot of stops. Now, in my real game world, not my test world, my system already has 3 stops and is soon going to have 4. So what I did was I combined elements from all of these different systems into this other system over here. Here we have a terminal station that has a very long delay on it, a lot of repeaters. It provides a nice long stop. It also has this block that produces a note of sound when a cart passes over it, so you get a notification of incoming and outgoing carts. And then it has this modified central station design. It has stops in either direction, but it is operating on a single level as far as track is concerned. The only elevations are the 2 small hills that provide the stops. I have eliminated the detector switches. In this case, the southwest rule means that a cart coming in this direction will always turn right onto that spur, but a cart traveling in this direction will always go straight. There's no detector, so the cart never does the wrong thing. So that's an improvement, and that's done just by changing the structure from being a loop to one that basically one side pinches in back onto the main line 2 blocks earlier than the other side. I do have detectors in this system, but the detectors here are only to let the system know to let the cart on the other lane go. So I have a detector as each cart exits the switch system, and another one as it enters them just before the stop. So there are 4 detectors in total. They are wired serially so that a cart either entering or exiting one end of the system will trigger a cart that is waiting on the other side to go in the other direction. And this gives me a kind of rudimentary flow control, in the sense that none of these stations will send a cart out onto the main line in that direction until it receives one in that direction and then stops it here on the hill. And as long as I have all my stations use this same design, there will never be any 2 carts heading in the opposite directions on the same mainline track. What I've got here is I've got 2 central stations, both with the same design, and 2 terminal stations at the end that just reverse the carts the way my other design did. Let me get this cart out of the way. There we go. Pick up another cart. And I have 1 cart waiting there on that station. That cart will not move until a cart comes into the station from the other direction and passes over one of the detectors. It will then wait there. It will trigger the cart on the opposite stop to move out of the system. And when it does, it will be triggered to move on towards the terminal, where it will then be reversed after a short delay. And then at this other station, I have a cart waiting here in the same position as this one here. That will be triggered by cart coming in this direction and passing over that detector, which is wired through a short delay to that piece of powered track. Carts coming in this direction will stop there. And I have a cart waiting here at the end of the system. It will head out, it will go to that stop, and it will trigger this cart to come towards the terminal. And then that cart will send out towards the other central station along that main line. So what I'll do now is I'll press this button, and that will start this cart moving in this direction, and I'm going to follow it to this station where it hits the trigger, and after a short delay, sends that cart down towards the other end. When that one leaves, it triggers the first cart to go down to the next station where it comes in, hits the stop, triggers the wire that sends this cart back in that direction before going off itself towards the end. Now basically the end stations are powered by delays, and in station they're triggered by a cart coming in the opposite direction. So now this one is reversed, waits there at the station, the other cart comes in, stops, triggers the first one, and it will go back out. And this will keep operating like this in a loop almost infinitely, as long as no obstructions get on the track, and you'll never have any head-on collisions. Now it is still possible if because of an obstruction or some other problem for one cart to catch up behind the other, but you shouldn't have that happen just because carts are operating at a different speed, because all of these stations take an incoming cart and stop it until the next one comes in. So even if you get in a cart and your cart is moving faster than the empty carts, your loaded cart will still come into a station and wait for another empty cart to arrive down the main line. Now, there are some problems with this design. One of them is that if the segment of mainline track going from a central station to the terminal is too long. In other words, if this piece is not shorter than the piece of mainline track coming into this central station, then the problem is that the cart will not reverse quickly enough. This cart needs to be waiting from this station, needs to arrive at the opposite stop before the cart coming in from the other main line arrives. Otherwise, it will miss its triggering signal and the system will stop. There are two ways to get around that. One of which is that you can just make sure that all of the lines that go from your last central station to your terminal station are short, or you can literally just not use terminal stations at all. Make all your station designs be the central design and simply close the loop off at the end, making the two stops right next to each other. In this case, this cart would not go to the right. It would just go right from the lower stop to the upper stop where it would wait. But since that loop is shorter than any mainline track signal, it would always work. The track here is all on a single level, although the wiring does need to cross. For instance, we need to accept triggering both from just before the stop and just after the stop. So you can see here that this wiring actually goes underground. See, this signal goes from this detector directly to there, but it's also triggered in another location. Yep, that triggers on the surface in that direction, but this detector, triggered by a cart exiting the system, also needs to trigger, but there's an intervening wire from the station in the other way. So what happens is that I had to dig a tunnel underground with a wire, and that wire goes in this direction underground and comes up over here. So basically, you have detectors at the front and back of each track system that trigger the opposite station. And that's because if carts arrive too close to one another, they won't trigger in the other direction. So you need to be able to trap them on either the entrance or the exit of the stop. These also tone blocks provide an audible note of carts arriving or departing, they do provide too many signals because they're triggered in either direction. When you're waiting at a stop, some of the tones are useful in the sense that they will notify you either of a cart that's just arriving or that the cart you're in is going to depart. Um, but they will also be triggered in the other direction. The only way around that is to do, I had earlier had a loop here where basically carts coming into the station from the terminal station would shift to the right and trigger a tone block, but that carts traveling in the opposite direction would be triggered another outside loop that did not trigger a sound. And this makes all the sounds be meaningful in the sense that once you're already in a cart and moving on the line, this would not trigger a sound. Obviously, that sound is not useful. You're already in a cart, you're already moving, you don't need to hear sound. But this meant two more detectors and two more switches that were not reliable, and sometimes the carts would not go all the way to the end of the line before reversing. Oh, and here we've already got an obstruction. A chicken has gotten into a cart. If an empty cart collides with an animal on the surface, the animal will be put into the cart. I'll just give this a push. And basically, if the system stops or gets confused, all you need to do is provide a push, especially near a terminal station. I've actually got fences here around the central stations to keep the animals out because an animal obstruction in the central station. But here it is. So I'll get in a cart. And you can see I'm moving quite quickly. And I'll wait here until a cart comes in along the main line in the other direction. Here it comes. And it will go along that line and stop and trigger me after a short delay. And here we go. And now we go into the next station and come up to the stop. And that stop is kind of short. Again, that's the problem with having carts that arrive too close to one another. Generally speaking, you just have to tweak the lengths of track and the delays so that you don't get stops that are too short or too long. Generally, too short is more of a problem than too long, and it does happen sometimes in the cycle. But this system is fairly reliable as long as there are no obstructions on the line. The problem with the chickens is that they do lay eggs every 5 minutes, and these eggs will block the tracks. Well, anyway, so there you have it. We have rudimentary operational model railroading in Minecraft. There's not a lot of aesthetic control over what goes on, but you can simulate a large number of operational scenarios. And I think as they continue to update the game, we'll be able to make systems that are more and more complicated. So thanks for watching.